Have you ever looked at a leader, a CEO, a president, a manager, and thought, this man is an idiot? How did he end up with power? You're not alone. We've all seen it. Fools promoted, charlatans worshipped, while the thoughtful, the principled, and the intelligent are pushed aside like inconvenient truths. It seems like the world isn't just broken, it was built this way, and maybe it was. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it over 100 years ago, not as a mistake of history, but as the inevitable outcome of a decaying culture, a world where mediocrity rises, not in spite of its foolishness, but because of it. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, in parties, in nations and epochs, it is the rule. Nietzsche didn't whisper truth, he screamed into the abyss, and the abyss, like today's society, screamed back with nonsense. He believed power had become a popularity contest for the masses, a carnival where clowns win crowns, and the deeper a man thinks, the more he's punished, ostracized by a society that fears truth more than it fears war. Why? Because the herd does not want a leader, it wants a reflection. A fool who speaks simply, a puppet with a smile, a performer who says what we already believe. In Nietzsche's eyes, the modern man had become too tired to think and too afraid to rebel. And so, we no longer elevate the exceptional, we elect the entertaining. Today, you don't need depth, you need applause. You don't need wisdom, you need virality. You don't need vision, you need followers. And so, the intelligent rot in quiet corners, mocked, cancelled, or crushed, while the foolish rise, laughing their way into power, propped up by a society that fears introspection more than destruction. But Nietzsche didn't just identify this pattern. He understood why it happens, why the mediocre rule, why intelligence threatens, and why morality itself has become a prison that punishes strength. In this video, we dive into Nietzsche's brutal diagnosis of power and how the most foolish people rise not by mistake, but by design. Because this is not just a modern problem, it is a human problem. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, but when your why is comfort, conformity, and collective safety, your how becomes obedience, and the loudest fool becomes your leader." So ask yourself, is the problem the men in power or the world that put them there? Look closely at the powerful today. Do they look intelligent, or do they simply look confident? The tragedy Nietzsche saw in modern man was this: we no longer admire depth, only the performance of depth. In a world obsessed with surfaces, perception has become the new reality, and the mask has devoured the face beneath it. Nietzsche once said, "Every profound spirit needs a mask." But he didn't mean deception as manipulation. He meant that truth itself is too heavy for most people to bear. So we hide behind appearances, not only to survive, but to be accepted. And this is where the fool thrives. Fools don't carry the burden of truth, they wear no weight. They present a version of themselves that is clean, loud, and simple. And in a shallow culture, simplicity wins. In politics, in business, even in relationships, the appearance of competence has replaced actual competence. And Nietzsche understood why this would lead to decay. The intelligent man questions himself. The fool projects certainty. The wise man sees complexity. The fool sells simplicity. The philosopher says, maybe. The demagogue says, always. This illusion is powerful because it feeds into what Nietzsche called the herd instinct. Most people don't want to be free. They want to feel safe. And what feels safer than a leader who pretends to have all the answers? And so we follow masks. We vote for masks. We promote masks. Because deep down, we're terrified of those who make us question ourselves. Nietzsche wrote that modern morality had become a celebration of the average, and when a society worships the average, anyone who challenges the norm is labeled dangerous, even if they're right. Think of the office where the loudest speaker gets the promotion. Think of the candidate who smiles confidently through empty speeches. Think of influencers who look polished but say nothing. These aren't anomalies, they're reflections of a deeper cultural rot. Nietzsche once wrote, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." This is why foolish people often rise. They don't threaten illusions, they reinforce them. And the masses reward them. So the next time you see someone rising through the ranks, don't ask, are they qualified? Ask instead, did they tell the people what they wanted to hear? Did they play the character everyone needed? Because in a society ruled by masks, the best actors win, and the most dangerous men are often the ones who look the most certain. In a just world, intelligence would rise, but Nietzsche believed the world is anything but just. He saw it clearly. Intelligence threatens the herd. It questions authority, complicates narratives, and sees beyond appearances. And for a society built on comfort and conformity, that kind of mind is dangerous. Nietzsche once wrote, "There is no more dangerous error than to mistake the effect for the cause. The fool is rewarded not because he leads well, but because he's easy to follow." The intelligent man, he causes discomfort, he disrupts routines, he exposes the cracks, and the herd will always hate him for it. Look at history. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth with questions. Galileo was silenced for looking at the stars with reason. Nietzsche himself died in obscurity, labeled mad for speaking truths the world wasn't ready for. Why? Because real intelligence doesn't entertain, it unsettles. The intelligent ask, what if we're wrong? What if the truth is ugly? What if our leaders are fools? And in a world addicted to certainty, these questions feel like threats. Nietzsche once said, "He who thinks a lot is not suited to be part of the herd." This is the paradox. The more you see, the less they trust you. The more you understand, the more they fear you. Intelligence becomes a curse because it doesn't fit into sound bites, slogans, or social media clips. Modern research even backs this. A controversial study found that leadership effectiveness rises with IQ, but only up to a point. Beyond that, it declines. The smartest individuals often struggle to connect with average minds, not because they're arrogant, but because the gap is real. So instead of being lifted up, they're pushed down, brushed off as too complicated, too intense, too much. And those who crave truth are silenced by those who crave comfort. Nietzsche called this the rise of the last man, the one who fears suffering, avoids conflict, and desires only peace, even at the cost of meaning. And in a world of last men, fools are easier to follow than philosophers. Ask yourself, have you ever hidden your intelligence to fit in? Have you ever been told to stop overthinking when you are simply trying to understand? That is the curse, to see clearly and still be rejected. Nietzsche once said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." And so, the intelligent are not just excluded, they are resented because they reveal a world most people don't want to see. Not because it's false, but because it's too real. Why do we celebrate mediocrity? Why is strength labeled as arrogance and weakness praised as virtue? Nietzsche had a name for this sickness: slave morality. Nietzsche once wrote, "Morality is the herd instinct in the individual." In his eyes, modern morality wasn't born from truth or justice. It was born from resentment, the resentment of the weak toward the strong, a morality designed not to uplift, but to restrain. When the strong man acts, he is called dangerous. When the coward obeys, he is called good. This reversal of values, this inversion of strength and weakness, is the reason mediocrity now thrives. In slave morality, power is evil, doubt is virtue, and anyone who dares to rise is seen as a threat. This isn't morality, it's envy dressed as ethics. Nietzsche once said, "The weak and failures shall perish, first principle of our love of man, and they shall even be given help to do so." He wasn't advocating cruelty, he was exposing a truth. That protecting weakness as a virtue leads to the death of greatness. In today's world, we don't ask, is he capable? We ask, is he nice? We don't say, did he speak the truth? We say, did it offend someone? In this upside-down world, to be excellent is to be a threat. So the herd promotes those who reflect their fears, not those who challenge them. A strong creative individual, what Nietzsche called the noble soul, acts from abundance, from inner power. But the slave, the mediocre, acts from reaction, from comparison, from hate. And over time, the slaves won. They didn't outthink the noble, they outnumbered him, and they built systems, religions, schools, governments that praised humility, obedience, and suffering. They told you that ambition is selfish, power is evil, and pride is a sin. But as Nietzsche warned, a society that glorifies weakness will drown in it. Just look around. The most celebrated people today are not the most capable, but the most agreeable. The ones who never say anything too true, too harsh, too deep. They smile, they nod, they belong. Because to belong, you must bend. And those who refuse to bend are broken. Ask yourself, have you ever been told you're too much for being honest? Have you ever seen a mediocre person promoted because they played the game? That is slave morality in action. It doesn't build strong leaders, it builds safe puppets. Nietzsche once wrote, "To educate educators, but the first ones must be educated themselves. And for these I write." He believed that before we could uplift humanity, we must first unlearn the morality of the herd. Because if we keep choosing safety over strength, we will keep choosing fools over leaders. The fool does not rise alone. He builds a ladder made of weaker men and climbs it with a smile. Nietzsche didn't just talk about individuals, he warned of entire systems built to protect mediocrity, systems that reward obedience, punish brilliance, and reproduce themselves like a virus. Nietzsche once wrote, "Society tames the wolf into a dog, and man is the most domesticated animal." What happens when a mediocre leader gains power? He surrounds himself with people even less capable than he is, not because he trusts them, but because they can't challenge him. This is how incompetence spreads, from the top down. The strong seek excellence around them. The weak seek loyalty. And when the weak rule, they don't build upward, they build downward. They create echo chambers, circles of flattery, armies of yes men, because competence is threatening and comfort is everything. Nietzsche saw this clearly in the modern bureaucracies and institutions of his time. The more organized the system, the more it favored the tame over the powerful, the obedient over the original, the agreeable over the authentic. Think of organizations where questions are discouraged, innovation is labeled as disruption, conformity is praised as professionalism. These are not accidents, they are designs that protect the weak by silencing the strong. Nietzsche once said, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." The fool in power replicates himself, not just in policy, but in people. He hires reflections of himself. He fears challenge, so he breeds compliance. And the deeper this goes, the harder it is to reverse. We see it in failed empires, collapsed corporations, broken governments, where the blind led the blind, and no one dared speak truth. This is why incompetence doesn't just survive, it entrenches. Nietzsche would call it the triumph of decadence, a slow decay where people still dress in suits, hold meetings, give speeches, but nothing of value is built, because no one strong is allowed to rise. Ask yourself, have you ever worked under someone clearly unqualified? Have you seen leaders promote weaker individuals just to feel safe? You're not imagining it. That is the fool's survival strategy. Drown greatness in mediocrity. And it works. Because the more fools in the system, the more normal it becomes. Nietzsche once wrote, "The man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies, but also to hate his friends." Why? Because sometimes your friends are the ones holding you back. Because sometimes what's killing greatness is what we've learned to call kindness. Why do people believe lies, even when they know they're lies? Because the truth is complicated. But lies are easy, digestible, comforting. Nietzsche understood this long before the modern age of propaganda and politics. He believed that truth was not some shining ideal, but a dangerous force, one that most people aren't built to face. Nietzsche once wrote, "The lie is a condition of life." Think about that. Not just that we accept lies, but that we need them to survive. We need the illusion that the world is fair, that our leaders are wise, that we're in control. And when someone comes along offering simple answers to complex problems, we follow. Not because they're right, but because they give us relief. This is why fools rise. They don't challenge us, they soothe us, they don't demand thought, they offer slogans. And in a world where most minds are exhausted by survival, comfort beats truth every time. Nietzsche once said, "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies." Convictions, absolute certainties. The man who says, "I alone can fix this," will always beat the man who says, "It's complicated and we must think deeply." Because the herd does not crave depth, it craves clarity. Who's to blame? What's the solution? Who will save us? And the fool answers quickly, even if he's wrong, In times of uncertainty, this instinct becomes even more dangerous. The more afraid people become, the more desperately they cling to simple narratives, and that's when the worst rise. Because the intelligent hesitate, they consider consequences, they see nuance, but the fool charges forward, with certainty in his voice and chaos in his wake. Nietzsche once wrote, "They muddy the waters to make it seem deep." And so, in the fog of crisis, the herd will follow the man who shouts loudest, not because he knows the way, but because he pretends to. This is the illusion of leadership in modern times. Not wisdom, but volume. Not truth, but confidence. Ask yourself, have you ever believed someone, not because they made sense, but because they sounded sure? Have you ever dismissed someone, not because they were wrong, but because they made you uncomfortable? That's the trap, because we don't just want to be led. We want to feel certain, and in a world addicted to certainty, the truth becomes the enemy. So the next time you hear a leader offer a simple solution to a complex world, stop. Ask yourself, is this truth, or is this just what I want to hear? Because Nietzsche knew, lies are sweet, truth is bitter, but only one will set you free. We've been taught that goodness wins, that character matters, that ethical people will rise to the top. Nietzsche would laugh at that, not because he hated goodness, but because he saw how often it is used as a weapon against the strong. Nietzsche once wrote, "The noble soul has reverence for itself." But the noble soul also carries a weight, a conscience. And in the battlefield of power, conscience is often a disadvantage. Because power is war, and war rewards the one willing to do what others won't. The fool has no ethical boundaries. He lies, he deceives, he manipulates, not because he's clever, but because he's unburdened. The intelligent man hesitates. He considers right and wrong. He plays fair, even when the game is rigged. And in doing so, he loses. Nietzsche once said, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." He believed that morality, when corrupted, becomes a form of self-hatred. We punish ourselves for being strong. We hold ourselves back to appear good. Meanwhile, the fool thrives because he doesn't care how he wins, only that he does. And when one fool rises using dirty tactics, others feel pressure to follow. This creates a race to the bottom, where ethics are weakness and manipulation becomes the norm. Look at politics, at business, at social media. Do the most principled voices rise to the top, or do the loudest? Ask yourself, have you ever held back out of fear of being too harsh? Have you watched someone succeed by doing what you refuse to? That's the cost of moral restraint in a corrupt game. Nietzsche didn't say, abandon ethics. He said, don't let your ethics become your cage, because in a world ruled by fools, the good man must be dangerous, or he will be devoured. After all this darkness, Nietzsche did not tell us to give up. He told us to rise above it. He didn't believe in fixing broken systems. He believed in transcending them. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." And that is the key, self-mastery. You cannot rely on the herd to choose what is best. You cannot wait for the system to reward the intelligent. You must become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, the one who creates his own values, his own strength, and his own meaning. The Übermensch does not beg for power. He doesn't chase applause. He doesn't fit in. He builds a new way of being from the inside out. This is not about rebellion for its own sake. It's about becoming so complete, so grounded that no system can define you. Nietzsche once said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he wasn't talking about physical pain. He was talking about becoming stronger in spirit, through rejection, through isolation, through suffering. Ask yourself, are you living by your own code? Or are you playing a role the herd gave you? The Übermensch is not above others, he is above illusion. He sees the world's corruption and chooses to create anyway. He sees the rise of fools and still chooses wisdom. He does not wait for permission to become powerful. Because real power isn't given, it's forged. So no, Nietzsche didn't offer comfort. He offered fire, not peace, but purpose. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." That is the real revolution. Not in systems, not in elections, but in the soul. And when enough souls awaken, the world won't need to elect better leaders. It will start producing them. If you've made it this far, you are not part of the herd. You are one of the few who dares to think deeper, question harder, and feel the weight of the world's illusion pressing down on your chest. Most people will never see what you've seen today. They'll scroll past it, they'll laugh at it, but maybe someone you know won't. So if this resonated with you, share it with a friend, a brother, a sister, someone in your family who's been asking the same question. Why do the wrong people keep ending up in power? They need to hear this. They need to know they're not crazy, just awake. And if you want more raw truth like this, philosophy that punches through illusion, subscribe to this channel. This is not content. This is a call to wake up. Nietzsche didn't want followers, he wanted fire starters. He wanted souls willing to burn through lies and become something greater. So ask yourself right now, what kind of man or woman will you become? Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs clarity. And if you feel that, then this message was always meant for you.